as adults, our body weight fluctuates only slightly throughout the year, although annual food intake, I think we ate most of that last night. We had a fabulous meal with about 10,000 calories, I think, that we need to burn off at some stage today. But on average, about 800 kilograms of food, which is an astonishing amount of food. So we all of us display a remarkable constancy, but we only need to be slightly out on that balance. And of course, obesity is the result. It's very difficult to take snapshot data, but CDC in 2004 suggested that US adults were eating 300 calories per day more than in the 1970s. And the Department of Health in the UK suggests that our energy expenditure has fallen by 800 calories since the 1970s. And clearly those contributory factors have all been important in this weight gain parameter. Well, we certainly know poor long-term success of diet-only weight strategies. I work with a number of national bodies in the UK and commercial diet and health clubs. Short-term, fine, but long-term is much more difficult to achieve the long-term success. We also know that a sedentary lifestyle constantly emerges as an important factor of weight gain in all ages. We also know that physical active people are less likely, or numerous studies have shown this, much less likely to be overweight than people who are less active. And just taking a snapshot of studies, this is from Wang in 1999, weight losses related to exercise only, we get only modest changes, and in some instances an increase in weight when we look at exercise-only interventions. When we look at diet only, then we've got much more success over 6-month programs. But when we look at diet plus exercise, then the effect fairly routinely seems to be much more effective in 6 months and over. So diet plus exercise, we think, is certainly the most effective of our weight loss regimes. Some work by Epstein in the early 90s, this is changes in the number of overweight with diet and then diet plus lifestyle, long-term over 5 and 10 years. So good results. When the data looked at including exercise there and focusing on exercise, calisthenics only when focused, there was an increase in the number of overweight. When aerobic exercise was a key factor in the interventions, there was a reduction. But when lifestyle focused on exercise, then the reductions were quite marked. What we find on many of our studies with pretty large numbers, but largely not reported in the literature, is that when we focus on exercise or physical activity, then I won't say diet takes care of itself, but we use it in terms of selective attention. If we can persuade people to just take up more physical activity, we do find long-term that they do inherently seem to change eating habits as a consequence of their own accord, rather than us making specific advice. So lifestyle plus exercise, we know, is an effective intervention for weight management. Typically what would happen when we have diet-only programs, then clearly we get total body weight, and this just gives you a scenario of what we might expect. We see a reduction in body fat, but generally we also see a reduction in fat-free body mass, LBM or lean body mass. When we look at exercise programs alone, we get a reduction in total body weight, but not quite as effective as a diet only. But we get an improvement in body fat percentage reduction, but an increase in lean body mass, fat-free body mass. But when we look at the combination of the two, then effective in terms of total body weight reduction, effective in terms of body fat percentage reduction, and no reduction in fat-free body mass, and normally a slight increase. One of the few long-term studies was done by Clem, and this is reported as the 2007 US National Weight Control Registry. One of the largest studies of individuals successful at long-term maintenance of weight loss. And here 629 women, 155 men, with a mean BMI of 35, lost an average of 30 kilograms. And this was maintained at 13.6 kilograms for 5 years. And the mean BMI at the end of the project, or ongoing project, was 25, so significant reduction in body mass index. And 72% were reported as maintaining at least 1,000 kilocalories of physical activity. And I suppose the bullet point coming out of this is that 90% of successful slimmers, as we might say, combined diet and exercise. So diet will certainly promote weight loss, but we do tend to see reported loss in lean body mass, a decrease in resting metabolic rate, RMR, and a more efficient energy storage system. One of the problems with exercise, if we just look at calories alone, you'd have to walk to Jeddah and back virtually to lose a kilogram. So huge amount of calories needed to reduce the energy balance by exercise alone. 1 kilogram of fat, roughly 7,000 kilocalories, 20 steps. About the distance it took you to get here from the entrance, 1 calorie or kilocalorie, and a 1 kilometre walk about 60 calories. In the UK we work in miles, so 100 calories is about 1 mile of walking. So our prescriptions are obviously in terms of distance. However, some of the exercise benefits include kilocalories accumulate over time, help or maintain or increase lean body mass, helps offset the RMR decrease, stimulates metabolism, improves mood and feeling of well-being, self-confidence, etc., helps prevent and treat comorbidities, more of those a little later, and improves fitness and cardiovascular and respiratory efficiency. And we do find it helps promote a healthy lifestyle in general. Well, here's a table I'm sure that many of you will have seen, and it's a way of just assessing how many kilocalories you would burn during an hour of walking at a gentle, modest walk, 360 to 420 calories in an hour of walking. Swimming, walking up and down stairs, clearly fairly calorie intense when we look at that. And for those of people into jogging, then calorie expenditure of round about 400 kilocalories per 30 minutes of jogging, or round about 800 or so for an hour of jogging. So we've got fairly well established tables on energy expenditure. But I think one of the most important aspects of exercise is perhaps not in weight reduction, but as was mentioned yesterday, in preventing weight gain, whether it's in children or in adults. We know as we get older, our metabolic rate tends to decrease quite significantly. And we heard yesterday an increase of roughly 3 to 5 kilograms per decade between the ages, particularly of 30 and 50, what we would call middle age spread. And this is clearly due to inactivity, a significant reduction for many of us of lean body mass, the reduction in RMR, and unchanged dietary habits. And yet the top graph will show us that with exercise, if we can retain or increase fat-free body mass, then we can retain or increase our metabolic rate. Hence the important role of exercise in prevention of age-related weight gain. So a summary of the mechanisms that we think link exercise to weight loss or weight maintenance. Firstly, an increase in daily energy expenditure. We often think after, say, a half hour of exercise that metabolism will stay elevated for some time after. We call this EPOC, excess post-oxidative capacity. It's relatively minimal, however, in terms of total calorie expenditure. But general movement throughout the day can certainly significantly increase daily energy expenditure. We can certainly improve body composition, fat loss, and particularly visceral fat reduction. We can increase the capacity for fat mobilization and lipolysis. We can also influence appetite with regular exercise, short-term reduction of appetite and reduction of fat intake, as was mentioned yesterday. There's also some evidence that it will prevent leptin from entry into the brain, again briefly touched on yesterday, and it certainly stimulates a thermogenic response in RMR and diet-induced thermogenesis. Preserves LBM and biochemical capacity. We know that in regular exercise we'll get an increase in mitochondrial density, an increase in lipolytic and glycolytic enzymes, and an increase in general muscle tone, which obviously influences posture and energy levels and the like. An increase in insulin sensitivity, improved plasma lipid and lipoprotein profile. Reduced BP, we see good effect on systolic particularly, and also diastolic in moderately hypertensive individuals. Certainly an improvement in aerobic capacity or cardiovascular fitness, and positive psychological benefits. So a huge plethora there of mechanisms and improvements that we see by recommending ideally daily physical activity to our children and adults. So I'll just touch a little bit on what type, how often, how long, or the question that I'm often asked is how little do I need to do to have benefit? Very difficult in a short session to summarize this. But aerobic exercise we know is extremely valuable, walking, cycling, swimming being three major activities that we would recommend. But also we know resistance exercise. Now, it could be simple exercises. You can do it at home. Resistance exercise using your own body just to strengthen muscles and improve lean body mass. Or traditionally going to a gym and performing resistance exercise. This will clearly depend on individuals, on their state of health. We do a risk assessment on each individual before the exercise will be prescribed to make sure it's of the right intensity, the right type and right duration. 3 to 5 days a week is ideally what we like to recommend for all of our clients and patients, whether it's weight management or cardiovascular protection. And ideally 30 minutes plus per session. So those will be the general guidelines. If I'm talking to general practitioners about advising patients, then these are the sort of simple bullet points that we'll be giving to our GPs, family practitioners and our practice nurses. There's also this thing called NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. That is moving around as you're sat in your seat. Many people fidget or answer mobiles or text or whatever. So it's general movement, not associated with what we would call traditional exercise. And we do find that lean people do tend to shuffle and wriggle and move around far more than when we compare neat movements with obese individuals. And again, many of our children, when we look at them, many of our very slim children are just not quite hyperactive, but very active when they're sitting still. They're just constantly on the move. We did some studies. I run a program out in Singapore in exercise and nutrition science, and one of my dietitians did a study with overweight ladies, 18 to 25-year-old ladies, and she was interested in duration. People in Singapore work 8 days a week and 26 hours a day, so it's an incredibly intense work commitment they have. So time for exercise is just not possible. So we've just no time. But every society says that. We all say that. So she was interested in volume of exercise, and she decided to give 2,000 kilocalories per week of exercise. And Group 1 did it on 5 days a week. And Group 2 did it at the weekend as a family activity on, for them, a Saturday and a Sunday. And the question was, which group lost most weight? And she did this for her master's thesis with me. And that was an interesting question. We would normally say more regularly, 5 days a week would be the ideal. What she found, and we got lots of information there, and we published this in Journal of the Royal Society of Health, in 2003, was there was no difference. So the message to our Singaporean ladies at the time was it's the volume of exercise, ideally. Clearly, you've got to be careful about the duration depending on the condition of the individuals. But these moderately overweight ladies lost significant amounts of weight on that 8-week program. So it was the volume, it was the total calories that was important per week. That she found was most important. If I look at how hard, there's lots of evidence to say fat-burning zones. So make your heart rate at about 60%, 70% of heart rate max, and you'll maximise fat burning. When we come to look at the data, actually, it's not quite as straightforward as that. Because on the left, you'll see exercise intensity low, 50%, or high, 75%. Two different exercise intensities. But if you read along to the second box, kilocalories for 30 minutes of fat, although the total energies expended was more for the higher intensity exercise, the amount of fat calories, if that's how we were looking to describe it, was pretty much identical. So our general guidelines to individuals is low intensity, which for most overweight and obese people is about their tolerance level anyway. Longer duration activities, more suitable for unfit and overweight. In the UK, affectionately, we call this LSD. So you can imagine the look on my patient's face when I say I'm going to prescribe LSD as part of your weight control program. For us, LSD doesn't mean the drug. It means long, slow distance. So the emphasis to the client or the patient is try and go for longer. Don't necessarily go at a high pace what you can't sustain. So long, slow, but try and build up the distance rather than build up the intensity would be our general guidelines for overweight and obese. In terms of intensity, some people are into heart rates or percentage of VO2 max, but we find with the majority of our patients we used this scale of perceived exertion. I'm not sure whether this is familiar in Saudi, but it's a very popular way of giving a patient some guidelines on how the exercise should feel when they're walking, whether they're doing a gym workout or whatever. And the ideal should be somewhere in the middle, where the green is. Moderate level of exercise, good health and fitness benefits, minimal risk. And that's a major, major factor, the minimal risk for the majority of overweight and obese patients that we would see. Only intense exercise for those who want to run up and down mountains or across continents or deserts or play football or in my occupational health line for groups like our firefighters and our paramedics, but can be risky for the unfit and for those with medical complications. So we tend to recommend an RPE, a rating of perceived exertion, somewhere between 11 and 13. Fairly light to somewhat hard, the sort of green area, which corresponds to about 61 to 85% of heart rate max for the ones who are interested in the physiology of this. What I thought I'd do just for the last few minutes, this is a picture of our campus at the university. My offices are way up on the top floor. I say to all my students that the lifts are out of bounds. So it's essential that they come up and see me, and are obviously out of breath when they come and see me. I'm sure some of them pant deliberately having come up in the lift. But one of my female students decided that she would like to look at the effect of stair climbing on cardiac risk and on general metabolism and body mass. So we gathered a group of 22 ladies, 18 to 20 years of age, BMI between 25 and 30. And I met them at the bottom of this rather imposing tower block, and I pointed up to the 7th floor and said, ladies, what we would like you to do is walk, these were all ladies who worked on the college campus or were students, come to the bottom of the tower and walk up to see my secretary, knock on the door and say, hi, Moira, and then walk back down again. And we'd like you to do that once a day for 5 days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So all the ladies said, no problem. I said, well, in week 2, I'd like you to do that twice a day. Ah, right, okay. And in week 3, 3 times a day. In week 4, 4 times a day. And one lady put her hand up and said, Prof. Sykes, how long will this project last? I said, 6 weeks. Oh, my goodness. So any time during their 8-hour working day, they had to come, sign out of work or whatever, just come, walk up to my PA, my secretary, sign in, as it were, and then walk back down again, and then go back to work. And my student was interested as a master's project in looking at the data, and we found some remarkable results. Resting heart rate dropped from 76 to 69. Stair climbing heart rate, understandably, as you can imagine, the ones of you who climb stairs on a regular basis, lactate was pretty high in the first week. Thighs were trembling, and not many people could actually make the top of the tower block without stopping and either taking the lift or pausing for breath. So the stair climbing heart rate was 168 in week 1, but by week 6, the mean heart rate was 158. Significant reduction in exercise heart rate. The oxygen cost was also more efficient. 28 mils per kilogram of oxygen in week 1, and the ladies got much more efficient, requiring 24 mils of oxygen to do the same bout of exercise, albeit they were going faster, because in the first week they were taking 155 seconds to climb to the top of the tower block. That is seconds and not minutes, and 105 seconds in week 6. Lactate was significantly reduced. What was interesting then was to look at some of the metabolic parameters, and total cholesterol 5.1 to 4.53, and HDLs we were particularly interested in, 1.24, and increased significantly to 1.58. LDLs are not on there, unfortunately, but they decreased by about 5%. Submaximal RER, that's respiratory exchange ratio, anything between the range of 0.8 and 0.9 infers mixed fuel mobilization, so a mix of carbs and fat. So in week 1, the ladies were, on our submax tests, were metabolizing a mixture of fuel with an RER of 0.85. But in week 6, anything below 0.8 is inferring a higher fat metabolism. So for the same exercise, the ladies were, in fact, metabolizing far more fat as a proportion of the energy, which, again, for us was a significant result. Aerobic capacity, that's fitness level in general endurance terms, increased significantly from 33 to 39 mils per kilogram, which put them from a low average fitness rating as a group for their age and sex to the good fitness rating. So really some remarkable results that we showed there. Body weight was interesting, 58 to 56 kilograms, and sum of 3 skin folds, 54 to 44. So significant drops in both of those parameters after 6 weeks of stair climbing. That was the equivalent of about 20 minutes of exercise per day by the time you'd walked up and down. Just to broaden it out quickly, as time is pressing, physical inactivity we now know is a leading cause of disease, and sedentary lifestyle among the 10 leading causes of death and disability. And in the UK, our inactivity costs us approximately 10.7 billion. If I could make a pill that conveyed all these benefits, I would be a billionaire by now. So a huge number of benefits that take in regular exercise, whether it's with children or with adults of all ages. I work quite a bit with elderly, and again, very important that we keep our elderly as physically active and mobile as possible. Metabolic syndrome, many of you are aware of this, but I was interested to hear Prof. Satara in 2005 at the BCS conference say that the key is 30 minutes of physical activity per day. You have more to gain from exercise if you are obese, have metabolic syndrome or diabetes. So an interesting statement. Again, the benefits of exercise in relation to diabetes. Certainly we can improve insulin sensitivity and improve glycemic control. In developed countries, we know physical inactivity is responsible for a raft of cardiovascular diseases. So it is a major risk factor in many of the diseases that we now see. And relative risk on unfit in red versus fit in blue are quite significant, with a 2-to-1 ratio relative risk in heart disease, in stroke, in type 2 diabetes, in colon cancer, in breast cancer and osteoporosis. Just for the last few minutes, I just want to bring to your attention some of the projects that we have currently going in the UK, particularly the ones associated in primary care. The first one, however, is a huge project now. It's called Healthy Weight, Healthy Lives, and it's a cross-government strategy. That's cross-party and cross-ministries, and 372 million was put into this project by the Department of Health in 2007. So out of that comes a programme or a more substantially funded programme on healthy schools. Part of that is employment of additional staff to look at health promotion within schools and promote physical activity in schools. And this now we can influence 4 million children and adolescents in our Healthy Schools project. Our GPs now, our family doctors, are encouraged to refer children and patients adults into exercise programs in our gymnasia, in our schools, in our village halls, in our various clubs, whether it's public provided or private provided. A GP would have a list of clubs and appropriate exercise areas in the area, and would be referring on either GP or practice nurse. But also in the NHS we have prescriptions which to many people are free. And in fact,